By now, we have all heard of fake news. And so we wonder what reality is. Now, you know fake news is the deliberate spread of misinformation in order to sway people a certain way, or even just to generate the sales of more newspapers, or get more commercials on broadcast TV, or more clicks on a Twitter feed. Fake news is used to distract, misinform, sow seeds of doubt. This past election in November, it really came to our attention. It's a big deal. It has potentially planet-changing consequences. According to a recent poll, 2/3 of all Americans, 2/3, think fake news causes confusion. The other 1/3 said, "Why are we even talking about this when I just read an article on Facebook that said we are being invaded by alien killer dolphins?" Okay, that last part wasn't even real fake news, but did you know that fake news is nothing new? In 1957, the BBC ran an article about the annual spaghetti harvest in Switzerland, showing hardworking farmhands picking pasta straight from the spaghetti trees. For weeks after, the broadcast company fielded phone call after phone call with folks wanting to know where they could get their very own pasta planting so they could put it in their own backyard. Going even further back in history, in this country, in 1835, there was the Great Moon Hoax. A series of articles ran in The Sun, a New York newspaper. These articles described bizarre animals on the moon, including bison, goats, unicorns, two-legged tailless beavers. I'm not sure why it's even a beaver at that point. And most intriguing, bat-like winged humanoids, Vespertilio homo. They were even given an official classification. And they built temples and other structures. There were trees, oceans, and beaches. And the article said these discoveries were supposedly made, quote, with a new immense telescope of an entirely new principle. I guess Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the wrong side of the moon. Of course, some think that that was a hoax too. Fake news has been used to sway people on all kinds of things, even very serious matters. In an effort to stir up anti-British resentment, founding father Benjamin Franklin, he wasn't known as the honest one, by the way, made a fake issue of a real newspaper. In that paper was a fake story that King George had hired Native Americans to commit atrocities against settlers on the frontier. Frontier being New York State at that point. None of this was based in reality. In fact, Benjamin Franklin did it from a suburb of Paris, France, while he was ambassador there. But it did what fake news does. It preys upon people's fears, and it suits the motives of those who write it. As they say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. But did you know this? That fake news, in the interest of swaying public opinion, goes way back even further than 1835 or sometime in the late 1700s. All we have to do is read just before what Pastor Pam shared with us a moment ago and just after in Matthew's account of the risen Jesus. So let's take a look at just before that. Jesus has just been executed. He's in the tomb, and here's the scene. The next day, that is, after the day of preparation, after Jesus had been killed, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember what that impostor said while he was still alive. After 3 days, I will rise again. Therefore, command that the tomb be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may go and steal him away and tell the people he has been raised from the dead. And the last deception would be worse than the first." Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can." So they went with the guard and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone. So this is before what Pam read earlier. And we see that long before Russian Twitter bots had the capacity to flood the internet with fake stories too strange to be true, we see that fake news was actually a strategy. Jesus' opponents are worried about the possibility that fake news from the disciples is going to hit the streets and rile the people up. Certainly this imposter is not going to rise again, right? The powers that be were determined not to let this Jesus movement that was getting a toehold not gain any more traction through fake news. They were going to seal that tomb up tight. They were going to post guards. They were going to defend what they saw as the truth. Now, right after that comes the earthquake, the angel, the guards scared stiff, Mary Magdalene and Mary encountering Jesus, then running off to tell the good news to the disciples with fear and great joy. And that's where we usually stop. But what comes next is even more fascinating than what we just saw there. And hold that thought. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I'm going to leave you in suspense for that minute. Because I'm looking at what happened before and after the Easter account, because we know how important context is. We know that you can't just pluck something out of the middle of nowhere, scripture, a conversation, anything, and count on getting kind of the whole story, the full context. You can get yourself in all kinds of trouble. I don't remember where I was reading it, but there was an example of this very matter of context that I just heard about recently. A man was looking in his Bible for guidance. He decided that it was time to get serious about his faith, and so he thought, what better place than the good book? He gets his Bible out, and not knowing exactly where to look, he decides on this course of action. He says, I'm going to open it up, I'm going to close my eyes, and I'm going to plunk my finger down, and whatever my finger lands on, that will be my guidance for the day. So he does that. He thinks, what better place than to start at the start? So he opens the Bible up toward the very beginning in Genesis, closes his eyes, he puts his finger down, and he reads. Adam and Eve realized that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves for themselves. He thought, well, okay, that doesn't really give me much guidance. Maybe what I read next will help. So he decides that didn't work, to go towards the front of the Bible. So he goes way further back in the Bible. He closes his eyes, he puts his finger down again, he opens his eyes up, and he reads Luke 10, go and do likewise. So he's got fig leaves, and he's got go and do likewise, and he thinks, this can't be right. This cannot be right. So he throws it back, a little further back, another chapter it happens to be, closes his eyes, puts his hand down, and reads from John, whatever you do so quickly. At least the weather is warming up for this poor guy. Context is important. It matters, and there is a context for this Easter story. So if you remember, going back, let me refresh your memory, the chief priests and Pharisees and Pilate, essentially all the religious leaders' powers and the political powers have had a meeting of the minds, and they've gathered to make sure that no fake news is going to get out there. They've sealed and guarded the tomb. Nevertheless, Jesus rises, Mary Magdalene and Mary are off to tell the disciples, and then we read this. While they, Mary Magdalene and Mary, were going, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests everything that had happened. After the priests had assembled with the elders, they devised a plan to give a large sum of money to the soldiers, telling them, you must say, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. If this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. So they, the guards, took the money and did as they were directed. So again, just to recap, we have guards reporting bad news to the bosses, news of what seemed like was a failed assignment, news they know their bosses don't want to hear. And why don't their bosses want to hear it? Because it doesn't fit the reality that the bosses knew, that the bosses wanted to create. They didn't want people to know about this new reality. The hypocrisy is remarkable. Those who were just worried about fake news getting out create this story of fake news. Just a chapter back, they're creating their own fake news now. You see what happened there? We see people, and we see what people are inclined to do when we're faced with an uncomfortable truth that threatens our power, and our understanding of the world. What they did, scheming, a cover-up, bribery, reminiscent of Judas's betrayal of Jesus, lying, collusion, abuse of the system, distortion of the truth to one's own ends. Oh my goodness, House of Cards got nothing on this. And we see why fake news works too. It works because we are drawn to the things that we want to believe. In fairness to these guys, it's not just these powers that generate fake news. We do it every single day. We pretend that familial dysfunction isn't really there. We ignore those physical symptoms that we'd rather not discuss or share with the doctor because we're afraid of what the diagnosis might be. We disregard the disappointing numbers on the report at work. We distort the facts that don't fit the reality that we want to project. Just look at Facebook pages, right? They aren't lies. They're not lies of biblical proportion, maybe. They're not schemes and fabrications, but we spread our own fake news every single day. It helps us create the reality that we would like to create. Because with fake news, studies have shown that we like information that fits in our mental filing systems. And those things that don't fit in our mental filing systems, they go to file 13, right? The garbage. So, when we find something we don't like, it's disparaged, it's thrown away, it's schemed even with bribery and all kinds of other stuff. What is even better, though, and this is where the fake news really comes in, is when somebody confirms what we have had a hunch about all along, right? I told you that politician was a terrible person. We knew that the science didn't add up on that. So, it's said that in the battle against fake news, what we need to do is to be open to additional information and information that might not fit our previous assumptions. Because there might be even more than one way that it fits. We talked about the problems of this or that, either or thinkings a few weeks back. Now, we have Pastor Pam for just this last Sunday before she leaves for several months. So I warned Pastor Pam that, look, she's nervous already. Pastor Pam, would you mind coming out here for just a moment? I just have a little quiz that I want to give you. And it has to do with how we file information. Look, you're so scared. Come over here. I told the videographers that this would be the shot right here. All right. So it's simple.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to give you 3 numbers.
Oh no.
All right.
I don't like numbers.
And what you need to do is you need to tell me there's a pattern that these 3 numbers follow.
Okay.
Okay. It's really pretty straightforward, right?
Okay.
There's a pattern.
All right.
Now, there could be more than one pattern, like we're talking about here. There could be more than one pattern that these fit. So if you are trying to figure out the pattern, you give me another 3 numbers that would fit the pattern, and I'll tell you if that's right or not. Okay? All right. You two can kind of play along in the pew.
Do I get to consult them?
Yeah, sure. Why not? All right. 2, 4, 6. Those are the 3 numbers.
8, 10, 12.
That is not the pattern.
Oh, I think it is.
That is a pattern.
Oh, okay. So there is a specific pattern.
Yeah, there's a pattern.
2, 4, 6. 8, 16, 32.
That is not the pattern.
No, that's not a good one.
No, but it fits. That is not the pattern, but that is correct.
Oh, that's weird. Okay.
Yeah, but it's right.
All right. Do I have a lifeline?
Yeah. Use your life. You get unlimited lifelines.
Who knows?
It's Easter.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Go ahead. Anybody have any help?
2, 4, 6.
2, 4. What, Nate? You need 3 numbers.
Yeah.
That fits the pattern, but that is what do you think the rule is? That's not the pattern.
Oh, it was so good.
Come on, people. It's really simple. You're going to be kicking yourselves.
Oh, that was your plan?
He said, what were your numbers? He said you add the two numbers before that, blah, 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 blah. That's not the pattern. That's not how it works. Yeah, what do you think? Well, what would be another example of three numbers you would give? Way too complicated. Way too complicated.
Jim knows.
135 is correct, but that what would you say is the pattern?
You gave the consecutive even numbers.
Not. He said I gave the consecutive even numbers. He gave the consecutive odd numbers. It's correct, but that's not the pattern. 12, 14, 16. Again, that fits the pattern, but that's not the reason it fits the pattern. Let's do two more. Yeah, what do you think, Jim?
17, 54, 8.
You were close, but no, that's not. That could have worked until the third number. Kai, what do you think? It's like he's a plant. That's my son. He's not right. He's right. Why do you think? Why did you say? It's just going low numbers from low to high. The numbers are just going low to high. It could have been 1, 2, 3. It could have been, like this example, 7, 54, 2,559. Sorry, Pam.
All right. I think I'll go to Nigeria now.
Now she really wants to go to Nigeria.
Shoot.
So sometimes we take information and we try to cram it in to what we previously think the patterns might be. And so if we have information from our own perspective and we get new information, we try to make it fit. What if it could be easier than that? What if we were able to be a little more open to see how new information might fit in? Not that one thing needs to be right and another thing needs to be wrong. And the reason I think of that this morning is because oftentimes when we think about Easter, we're given two things that we can believe. Either it's fake news because resurrection doesn't happen. That does not fit how we understand science. It does not fit how we understand medicine. It doesn't work. And so it's fake. And so the whole thing is a bunch of rubbish. On the other hand, we have folks who say, you must believe, and you must believe it this way. You must believe that Jesus' body was physically resurrected, that air came into his lungs, that he walked the earth again. You must believe that, or you're bound for hell. I choose to believe neither of those things. Is it possible that there's other information here? Is it possible that there could be a third way? Is it possible that Jesus is alive and well, but in a different way? Is it possible that there's another Easter reality? Think about that. I want to share a story with you. It is from our Run for Peace beneficiary. It's from New Community Project. New Community Project has this idea that when we form together as communities, both locally and globally, God is present. God is there, and that the world can be made a better place. We talk about turning the world upside down. So, New Community Project is where I learned this story. It's a story, I changed the name of the woman, but it's a very real story. It's no fake news. Her name is Jessie. She grew up the child of substance abusers. She was abused as a child. She left home, she ran away when she was in her teens. And she soon found a boyfriend, somebody who could kind of look after her, so who could take care of her a little bit, and she could take care of him a little bit. Well, as they were living together, one day their friends, their neighbors, asked if Jessie and her boyfriend could watch their kids. And so they did, and Jessie went into the back room for a little while to watch some television, and while she was away, her boyfriend abused one of the children. The way that the laws were written, Jessie was an accomplice. She was convicted and she was jailed. After she got out of jail, again, as you can imagine, having no place to go, she turned to substance abuse herself. That landed her living next to a dumpster. which is where our friends from NCP met her. They got to know her, they developed a relationship. She soon moved into one of the intentional communities of NCP. And while there, she became sober. She's now been sober for 5 years. If that all weren't good enough, she now helps people get their education, adults who are learning and getting their higher education. And if that weren't enough, she loves to tinker around artistically. Now, I don't know if you know if Harrisonburg was a place that first started this notion that we see in these yard signs. We're glad you're our neighbor. Jessie was tinkering around one day, and she had heard that. Guess who came up with this design? Jessie. Someone who was literally told she was trash, someone who was living next to a dumpster, went on to cast a new reality. So, what is real? What is fake? What is Easter reality? Could Easter reality in the situation of Jesus be something like somebody came, Jesus, who showed that the powers that be don't always get to set what is real news and what is fake news? Could Easter reality be that everyone has access to God? Could Easter reality be that justice is possible? That none has more power or right than another because of birthright? Could Easter reality be that love and service can overcome hatred and violence? Can Easter reality be that walls are broken down between peoples? That God can help us get our lives turned around and on the right path? No matter how you view resurrection, all those things are real. Easter reality. Easter reality is tractors going to Nigeria, but more so the Nigerian people growing out of the ashes. Easter reality is this week in Iraq. Christians and Muslims are going to walk 100 miles through the Nineveh plain in the name of peace to end violence. Easter reality is that this congregation is bucking national trends and growing in strength of witness, in depth of spirit, in morale and number. It's getting hot in here. There's a lot of warm bodies. We have heard God calling us to a different reality. And though Easter realities don't always fit the patterns that we know, don't always fit the patterns that the world gives us, doesn't mean they're fake news. In fact, it may mean just the opposite. So, Easter, reality or fake news? I know what I think. What do you think?